Welcome back to the deep dive.
Exactly.
And today we're going deep.
Uh-huh.
We're talking about instructions for worship, specifically the ones found in Exodus chapter 30.
Yeah.
It's almost
yeah.
like, well, I was going to say, it's like an ancient user manual for sacred space.
That's a great way to put it.
What do you think?
That's exactly right.
So we have this text, right? And the thing that jumps out at you right away is the detail.
Oh, yeah.
It's so specific.
It is.
And that's what we're going to explore today. We're not just reading these directives. We want to understand what they might mean,
Right.
what they tell us about that time period.
Uh-huh.
So let's start with the altar of incense. It really seems like this is a key part of their rituals.
It was.
It was. The description is incredible. It reads like an architect wrote it.
Oh, yeah.
So we have acacia wood.
Oh.
And that was a common material back then.
It was very durable in that climate.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It had to last.
Yeah.
And it's shaped very precisely. 1 cubit square, 2 cubits high. And just as a reminder, a cubit is about the length of your arm.
From your elbow to your fingertip.
Right, that's how they measured things.
It's a common unit.
Exactly. But there's a detail here that's really fascinating. The horns. They weren't added on later. They had to be made from the same piece of wood as the altar.
Wow.
And then the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Top, sides, horns. All covered in gold, pure gold, with a gold molding around the edges.
That's incredible.
You can really picture it.
You can.
The shining golden altar. It must have been impressive.
It must have been.
So beyond just the look, there were practical instructions too, like how to carry it.
Oh, right.
They put gold rings on the sides, below the molding, and then acacia wood poles, also covered in gold, to put through the rings.
So they could carry it.
So it wasn't a permanent fixture.
Had to be portable.
Exactly, they had to be able to move it. And where it was placed, that was important too.
Incredibly important.
Okay, so tell me about that.
Right, so it was placed in front of the curtain that separated the most holy place.
The Holy of Holies,
Exactly.
where the Ark of the Covenant was kept,
Right.
but specifically before the atonement cover.
The lid of the ark,
Right.
which was considered the most sacred spot.
It was like the place where God's presence was most strongly felt.
Yeah, you could say that.
So the location of the altar, right there in front of that.
It really emphasizes how important the incense offering was.
Like a pathway, a way to approach the divine.
Absolutely.
In the ritual itself, it was a daily thing.
Every single day.
Aaron, the high priest, he had to burn incense on it
Fragrant incense.
every morning when he tended the lamps. And again at twilight.
When he lit the lamps.
So twice a day,
Morning and evening.
a constant offering. The text says, before the Lord for the generations to come. It was supposed to continue forever.
Perpetual act of devotion.
And there's something else that's interesting here, this altar. It was exclusively for incense. They couldn't offer anything else on it. No burnt offerings, no grain offerings,
Right.
no drink offerings, just incense. It makes you think. Maybe the fragrant smoke symbolized something, like prayers,
Yeah.
or maybe communication with God.
Rising up to heaven.
Exactly. And then, on top of the daily ritual, once a year, Aaron had to perform a special act
Yeah.
of atonement on the horns of the altar, using the blood of the sin offering.
The atoning sin offering.
Right, a specific sacrifice. So this annual ritual, it adds another layer to the altar's meaning.
Definitely.
It's not just about offering incense, it's also about purification,
And reconciliation.
making things right. The text calls it a most holy act.
Uh-huh.
So we have these specific materials, precise measurements of your deliberate placement,
Yeah.
and these rituals, daily and yearly. It all points to the fact that the altar of incense was central to their worship.
It had a very significant purpose.
And now we shift gears a bit to something completely different.
Okay.
Atonement money. Or sometimes it's called a census ransom, and this was required. Whenever they took a census of the Israelites, everyone who was counted, 20 years old or older, had to pay this ransom to prevent a plague.
That's interesting.
It's a bit ominous, isn't it?
It is.
This idea that counting people could have spiritual consequences.
Right. It's almost like they thought that counting people was something only God should do.
Exactly.
And this ransom, it was like acknowledging God's authority.
Over life and death.
Exactly.
And the amount was specific. Half a shekel, according to the sanctuary shekel.
Which weighed 20 gerahs.
We keep seeing that measurement, don't we?
They do. It seems to be their standard.
For sacred things.
Uh-huh.
And what's really striking is that everyone paid the same amount.
It didn't matter if you were rich or poor.
Right.
Everyone contributed equally.
What do you think that signifies?
Well, it suggests that every life was equally valuable.
In the eyes of God.
regardless of their wealth or status.
So this payment, it wasn't about wealth, it was about personal responsibility.
And participating in the community's well-being.
And this money, it wasn't just stored away. It was used for the service of the tent of meeting.
Right, their central place of worship.
It was a memorial for the Israelites, making atonement for their lives.
So the census wasn't just about numbers.
It was directly tied to their spiritual
It
lives
funded their worship.
and their atonement
It connected each person to the community.
and to God. Moving on, we have the basin for washing. And this sounds very practical at first.
It does.
A bronze basin with a bronze stand placed between the tent of meeting and the altar
Okay.
and filled with water.
Sounds simple enough.
It does.
But it had a crucial purpose.
Oh, absolutely. So tell me, what was it used for?
Well, Aaron and his sons,
The priests.
the priests, yes,
They had to wash their hands and feet there.
before entering the tent of meeting and before approaching the altar to minister and present offerings.
So this washing, it wasn't just about being clean.
It was about ritual
And
purification.
they had to be cleansed
Mm.
before they could interact with the sacred.
Before they could approach God.
And the text is very clear about what would happen.
Mm.
If they didn't wash, they would die.
That's a pretty serious consequence.
It's a huge statement. It shows you how seriously they took this idea of approaching the divine.
It wasn't something to be taken lightly.
Exactly.
Right.
They believed
Yeah.
that everyday life could make you impure
And you had to be cleansed.
before you could enter God's presence.
It's separating the ordinary from the sacred.
Right. And this wasn't a one-time rule. It was a lasting ordinance
For Aaron and his descendants,
for all generation.
it became a fundamental part of the priesthood.
It was woven into the fabric of their service. Now, let's talk about something a little more sensory.
Oh.
The sacred anointing oil. They give a recipe for it, and it's incredible.
Tell me about it.
It's like a swarm. You're walking through an ancient market, surrounded by spices. They call for 500 shekels of liquid myrrh, 250 shekels of fragrant cinnamon, 250 shekels of fragrant calamus, 500 shekels of cassia, and a hint of olive oil, all measured out according to the sanctuary shekel.
Mm-hmm.
And the instructions say it had to be a fragrant blend, the work of a perfumer. So this wasn't just mixing things together.
It was an art.
They needed a skilled artisan to create this oil. So it was clearly very important to them.
Very intentional.
And they used it for so many things.
What kinds of things?
Well, they anointed the tent of meeting.
The entire structure.
Yes. The Ark of the Covenant law, the table and its articles, the lampstand and its accessories, the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offering and its utensils, even the basin with its stand.
They anointed almost everything in the sanctuary.
And when they anointed something, it became most holy,
Set apart.
and anything that touched it
Mhm.
also became holy.
It's like the holiness was contagious.
Exactly. It spread from the anointed object
Yeah.
outward.
It's fascinating.
The oil was like a physical marker of sacredness.
Mhm.
It showed that these things belonged to God.
They were set apart for his service.
And they didn't just anoint objects, they also anointed people,
Oh, right.
specifically Aaron and his sons,
The priests.
to consecrate them for their service,
It was part of their ordination.
their official induction into the priesthood.
It set them apart.
It's like the oil transformed them. It wasn't just a fragrant substance, it was a way to make things holy.
Both objects and people.
But then, the instructions get really strict.
How so?
Well, this oil, it couldn't be poured on anyone else. No one could make another oil with the same recipe. It was exclusive, sacred. And the penalty for misusing it was severe.
What was it?
You would be cut off from your people.
That's a pretty serious consequence.
It's a huge punishment. Why do you think they were so strict about it?
I think it shows how important this oil was to them,
It was sacred, set apart, and they didn't want it to be treated casually.
or used for personal gain.
It had to remain special. And then we come to the instructions for the incense. And this is a different formula from the incense that was burned daily.
A special blend.
Yes.
Yeah.
They call for gum resin, onycha, galbanum, and pure frankincense, all in equal amounts. And they also say it has to be salted.
That's
What do you think the salt signifies?
Well, in many cultures, salt represents purity.
And preservation.
Yes,
It could also be a symbol of covenant.
a binding agreement.
So adding salt to the incense,
It would have emphasized its sacred nature.
it's like it was making it even more holy. And this incense, it had a specific purpose. Some of it had to be ground into powder and placed in front of the Ark of the Covenant,
In the tent of meeting.
the meeting place with God. It was considered most holy.
So the incense was directly connected to God's presence.
It was like the rising smoke was carrying their prayers and offerings up to him.
It's a beautiful image.
It is.
Right.
And just like with the anointing oil, there were strict rules about the incense. It could be made for personal use.
Just to enjoy the fragrance.
It was holy to the Lord.
Reserved for worship.
And the penalty for misusing it was the same.
To be cut off from your people.
So they were really serious about this distinction
They were.
between the sacred and the profane.
These things.
The oil,
and the incense.
they were only for God.
They weren't to be treated like everyday things.
So to recap, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We talked about the altar of incense with its daily and yearly rituals, the atonement money, that was required during a census, the basins for washing, and the importance of ritual purification, and then the recipes for the sacred anointing oil and the special incense, both of which were highly restricted. What's striking to me is the level of detail in all of this.
It's amazing.
It wasn't enough to just have an altar.
Or to use some oil.
They had specific materials,
Exact measurements.
precise placements,
Specific ingredients.
even methods of preparation.
It was all laid out very carefully.
And each item
Each ritual.
had a purpose. They all contributed to the sanctity of the sanctuary.
They were all part of a larger whole.
It makes you think about how they view the relationship between the physical world and the sacred.
They were intertwined.
Their actions weren't just actions, they were deeply symbolic.
They believed that doing things the right way was essential for their relationship with God.
Every detail mattered. Every choice, every action, it was all part of their worship. So I'm curious, what details stood out to you the most?
That's a tough one.
It is. There's so much here.
There is.
But if you had to pick one thing, what would it be? What really made you think?
You know, I think it's the severity of the consequences
Oh, interesting.
for misusing the oil and the incense.
Being cut off from your people.
Exactly.
That's a harsh punishment, but it shows just how seriously they took these things.
It emphasizes the absolute distinction between the sacred and the ordinary.
I think that's a good point to end on.
It is.
It leaves us with a lot to ponder. What do you think?
I agree.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive, and we'll see you next time.